everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nicole and today we're here for my weekly wrap-up. Well, good morning or good evening everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and spending it with me while I prattle on about the books that I have read in the past week. If you're a new subscriber, thank you so much for dropping by to see what this video is all about. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it, and then that way you're not going to miss out on any of my future bookish uploads. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back again. All right, so I only read one book last week. Now, there is a reason for that. I have been super busy in the background getting ready to put out another edition of Down the Rabbit Hole magazine, and I also had a headache. It wasn't quite a migraine, but it was there and it was making it very difficult to read. So I did listen to a couple of my big chunkster books, but I did slowly read through this one with the audio as well. So we are, as I said, we are talking about as I just showed, we are talking about The Emperor's Waltz today by Philip Henschner. This book, I struggled with this book, not because of the content or anything like that. I think it was just more the layout of the book. But I have filmed my thoughts along the way and the little problems that I had along the way with the book and whatnot. I don't think that this book is like... I've only given it a 2-star rating and it's not because of the content. It's just, I just didn't gel with this book. Like it just, yeah, I just found it very weirdly set out, and like even just looking at the book right now, it doesn't bring me any joy after reading it. Like normally if I've really enjoyed a book and I pick it up afterwards, I'll have a moment that sort of brings it all together for me and gives me that joyous feeling that I've really read a good book and whatnot. For this, I pick it up and I just don't feel like I've read a good book. It's broken up into books, and I think I discussed that in my thoughts as I'm going along, and you'll see me in various places around the house, in the car. Yeah, so basically, the way it was laid out, I didn't understand that the stories didn't really tie in together, and they were like short stories. So we had we've got Christian in Germany in 1922, and then you've got, you know, a Christian woman being hacked to death in the arena, and then you've got another story in there about a diabetic with a toe that may be getting amputated and the vulgar language coming from the Irish patients in there. You've got Jewish hate in this. You've got homophobia, homophobic things in this as well. Yeah, it's just a hard book to sort of explain. So let's get into my thoughts. You'll get to see what my thoughts are. We'll get into those, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about my overall thoughts now that I've had some time to think about the book. All right, so I'm just doing a check-in. I haven't got a great deal of reading done, but I've made progress in most of the books. Tonight I am reading The Emperor's Waltz by Philip Henschner, and I'm up to book 4, which is page 157. So in book 1 it was about Christian, and we were in 1922, and he has gone off to Weimar where he is learning to be an artist, and it sort of just covered a bit of that. There was a lot of, I think it was around the time that we had the Nazi movement was starting to make a bit of an appearance, because there was some description about soldiers wearing armbands that had some sort of design on it, and as book 1 ended, it was starting to get a little bit uncomfortable because they were starting to talk about the Jews and how they had wrecked the money in Germany and everything was so much more expensive because of them and all the rest of it. And Christian was becoming very highly uncomfortable living with the people that he was living with, that his father organised him to go with and live there. And he became very uncomfortable with the landlady, who was very anti-Jewish, and there wasn't slurs as such or anything like that, but it was starting to get a little bit tense for me as the reader, because I knew that was coming into it. Then we've jumped to 1979, which is book 2, and we are talking to we're learning about Duncan. Now Duncan
is gay, he's living in Sicily, and his father is dying, and he's been requested to come back to England. And Duncan was a bit of an arse in that book, like, excuse my language, but he was a bit of an arse to his dad on his deathbed. Just saying that, like, obviously that he has come out to his parents, and it didn't go very well. And there's obviously been a strained relationship there. Was being really mean to his dad and just really trying to upset him by saying that he was going to, knowing that it was going to upset his dad, that he was going to open up a gay bookshop and sell books from gay authors and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out, whether he does end up getting money or not on that. And so then it sort of just ended sort of at that point where he's walked out of the room and the nurse has come in, and he said to the nurse, oh, he seems to be very upset. He needs some medication. And that book's ended there. And then it's come into like the next year, into the third book. It says the next year, so in 1980, and we're following a group of kids that are at a dinner party, like their parents have got together for a dinner party and the kids have gone upstairs. So the parents are downstairs, and while the kids are upstairs, they are getting into the vodka and the gin and mixing drinks and stuff like that and taking poppers. And then this 15-year-old girl is up there. These kids are only 13, and they're talking about anal sex and lesbian porn, and they're taking poppers, and then the 15-year-old gives them more alcohol and cocaine, and this little kid Basil is experiencing all this for the first time. I've got a feeling that the twins that are in it have done sort of stuff like this before, because they seem to be very comfortable with the situation, whereas Basil's very uncomfortable with the situation, as you would expect a 13-year-old to be who's not experienced any of that before. But the 15-year-old girl showing them all the porn and giving them cocaine and the alcohol and all the rest of it is just, just out there for 13-year-olds to be experiencing it. And so book 3 sort of ended with Basil reflecting that he feels quite grown up now, that he has learned about all this stuff. We're about back into 1979 again, and we're about to go into book 4, which I'm assuming that's going to be about Duncan. So I will check in after I've read a few more pages. It's a bit of a chunkster book. It is on my big book summer read, and it was also a bingo prompt as well. So I've got till the 1st of July to get it finished. I'm hoping that I'm going to get it finished this weekend. But do you like my bookmark that Savannah got me for Mother's Day? It's a bee. I love it, and it's all metallic. It's a metal one. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I love using it. All right, I'm going to get back into my book. Okay, so it's Friday afternoon, and I'm still reading the Emperor's Waltz, and I don't know, I'm really I'm halfway through the book now. As you can see, I'm just on 303, and I've just gone into book 6, and I've just started reading, I just finished reading book 5, and I'm struggling just with the content. It's starting to get really anti-Jew, the anti-Jew movement is picking up, and I'm finding it very disturbing, and I think I'm finding it disturbing because we all know how that turned out. So they are in Germany. It's following Christian, and he's met 2 young girls, and it's sort of telling their story, but at the same time there's also this underlying problem of the German people starting to really hate on the Jewish people and saying that they're taking everything from them, that they're taking their money, and that they're making life hard for them, and that they're running out of food and all that sort of stuff. And it's all because of the Jewish people, is this undertone. And there was a scene in book 5 where a clearly drunk person was attacking a Jewish gentleman and hissing at him when he was saying his name, and he was with his daughter, and the daughter was crying and all the rest of it, and they were saying, oh, you've had a fine morning earning all this money, and it was just hatefully written, and I'm just not coping with it. I'm almost to the point now, because it's broken up into books and there's several timelines in it, and we're just gone into 203 AD. It's book 6, and so I've just finished reading in 1922, and this is when it's set. So they've got, I don't know, I'm struggling with it. I'm really struggling with the hatefulness of it and all the rest of it. So because it's broken up into books, I'm almost to the point where I think I'm going to skip that. All right, so book 4 is about Duncan, and he is opening up a gay bookstore, and I think we're going to also have some hate coming from that as well, because that sort of ended with him reminding himself to give the glazier's number to the new worker that he's got there. And he's moved into a neighbourhood in England, and I don't think it's going to go very well to him. He's just got to the point where he's opening it up. So I'm thinking that I'm going to continue reading that one and just see what happens, because it hasn't got too hectic at the moment. There hasn't really been any hate. There was an incident where a shopkeeper opposite him, where he's been buying his food for the last 2 months and all the rest of it, actually done something really gross, and he was like, he just made a mental note of it. Like it wasn't horrific, but it wasn't nice either at the same time. So I'm a bit red in the face because we've been out in the sun today, and obviously because I'm in the car, and yeah, so I'm going to continue on reading that one, but I think I just really need to miss the stuff that's happening in 1922. I'm finding it very, very unsettling, and just the way this author has written it, it feels very hateful, and I just don't know where it's going to go. Like, there is an underlying love story, but it's not very a love story either, because it's more focusing on the fact that they're all in hardship. It's winter, and they're, no food around, the money has gone crazy. I guess I'm a little bit ignorant, because I don't know really what happened in Germany after the First World War and in the early 20s. I don't really know that history. I've never really looked to the history of Germany or what caused the Jewish hate that came from them and all the rest of it, because it was just, I find it very horrific. I find it very hard to think about. And just what the people went through, like, not so much the Germans, but the Jewish race, the Jewish people, and the race and hate crimes and stuff like that against them. I do find it very unsettling. And so I've never really looked into the reasons why it happened, because I have found it so unsettling. But I think it's maybe time that I start to look into that and try to understand it a little bit better. But for right now, I cannot read it. I am struggling with reading it. And I don't think that this is an exceptional book, but it's got me a little bit intrigued. It's been quite slow, and I have actually gone and found it on audio so I can listen to it and read along with it, because I have found it so slow and a little bit boring in some parts. Like, it's just droning on a little bit. So I am listening to it on audio because I'm quite curious, but I just don't know whether I can continue reading the Christian story, the 1922 story. All right, so I'm checking in. I'm now up to book 8. I've just read book 6 and 7. Have no idea who they are or why they're even in the book. I'm guessing these are like short stories type things, so we're following some more often than not. But these last 2 were like little short stories. I don't even know if these characters, like, I didn't even get a name of the character in book 7. This is a very strange book that I'm reading. 203 AD was following the story of a merchant's daughter, and I have forgotten her name. But it was basically centered around Christianity. I thought I could find it, but I can't. So it was based around Christianity and the persecution that they were dealing with when the Romans were essentially running the show. So it was after Christ, and it was at the time when the Romans were putting the Christians into the arena and having animals come out and basically kill them. And then we've gone into book 7, and we're in the year 2000, or after the year 2000, because we had mobile phones and iPads in this one. And it is about a diabetic gay man that goes into is it Alfred Hospital in London, and he looks like he's going to get his toe amputated. And I've just finished it, and it basically the whole story was about him trying to get out of the ward. He was in the ward with a couple of Irish dudes who were just rude as anything, like dropping the F-bomb, the C-bomb, you name it, being really crass to the nurses, calling them black C words, and it was a bit heavy, like in that sort of aspect. It was done, and his whole thing was trying to manipulate the situation to get his own room, to get away from one of the Irish dudes that obviously had an incontinence problem and was a little bit demented. They were just really rude, and this guy was talking about all this sort of stuff, and his whole thing of being in there was to get into a room, and then ended with him in the room and him watching the world go by. Like, okay, so I've finished The Emperor's Waltz. I don't get it. I really don't. I ended up reading everything in the book. I didn't skip any parts or anything like that. Duncan and, so I'll just start with, like, I don't understand The Merchant's Daughter, what had related to this book. There was no more mention of the guy in the hospital that was getting his toe amputated. It just ended. Duncan and his big gay bookshop, that ended up just still running along, and he was having problems from time to time. The police came in, took all of it, trying to say that he was selling pornography and all that sort of stuff. The young kid that turned up, that was worked for him for a very long time, and then just basically packed up and went to Berlin, and like it sort of covered some of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and stuff like that, with their friends dying and being very ill and all that sort of stuff. I'm whispering because it's very early hours of the morning, so hopefully you can hear this okay. And so basically it just covered some of that. He had that shop open up until 2007, I think the timeline was, because Duncan's sister had a baby in that story as well, and then the kid that took off and went to Berlin, Celia and Arthur in the epilogue ended up meeting up, but even that story just was really weird. She's turned up with these books which sort of tie into the story, because when Duncan first opened the store, he bought 250 copies of this book. Subsequently, he never sold them, but then later on, and the author died, and he had all these signed copies, and then later down the line, they ended up making a movie of it. So Duncan closed up the bookstore because it wasn't making money anymore, and he moved back to Sicily with his millionaire boyfriend Ronnie. But I just don't get this book. I don't get it. Like, stories just stopped. Characters just disappeared. Then there was so many characters that came in. And in the 1922 timeline to 33, I think it goes to, it was just weird. Like, Christian was, like, he was an artist and then he became a teacher. There was some sort of upheaval, and I know I didn't miss anything because it went to other characters in bars and stuff like that, which had nothing to do with his story or anything like that. He ended up marrying the girl and they were having a baby, but it just sort of went with the soldiers or the officers were coming in to get them out of their art and craft studio, and basically he wasn't sure whether he was ever going to see his wife and his kid again, and then it just stopped. The story just stopped. There was no closure. You don't know what happened to them. You know that they were led away, but you don't know what happened to them. It just weird. And the stories weren't even, I wanted to read it purely out of curiosity, how the Emperor's Waltz is going to be tied in this. The only way that it was tied in was every now and again the author would write something along the lines, oh, I heard a tune, oh, it's the Emperor's Waltz, or they were dancing and it was the Emperor's Waltz, but that was it. That was the only, but the stories didn't tie in together. They had nothing to do with one another. The timelines were, I don't know. It was all weird. It was just, the stories weren't riveting. they weren't fast-paced. I was interested in the gay bookshop because apparently in the author's notes there is actually a gay bookshop in London that he was used it. It's called, so the final notes from the author is, there is indeed a London bookshop devoted to gay literature which has been in existence for 35 years. I have been a customer of the Gaze the Word in Marchmont Street, but yeah, and so it's still open apparently. I don't know when this book was published, so at the time of this book it was still open, and I'm guessing it probably still is open, and this was published in 2014. So I don't understand this book. It's just a story that's broken up. Like, it could have been, the 1920, it's basically books, little short books. It could have been the 1922 to 33 one book, and that would have been maybe 150 pages. The kids that got onto drugs and all the rest of it, no mention of them again, ever. Nothing about Basil, nothing. And it was like the story he was dreaming of going to school and selling drugs, basically, to his friends. And then the story just stopped, and there's nothing. So, yeah. I gave it 3 stars. Actually, I'm going to change my review to 2 stars because I just did not like this book. And I was actually expecting pretty good things from this book because every review that I had read, not on this book, but on other books, because there was no reviews on Goodreads for this. None that I could see anyway on my app. So if I'm maybe on my computer or something, I might be able to see a bit more. But on the app, I couldn't see any community reviews or anything like that. But his other books that he's written, apparently, they all got rave reviews. Not from me, though. Not this one. All right. Yeah, that's The Emperor Waltz, 2 stars from me. Not a great book.
All right, so as I have had time to think about the book, and even before filming this, I was still thinking about the book. So even though I've given it a 2-star rating, it's actually provoking thought and what I actually read and trying to understand what I read. Now, I don't think I'm missing the point of the book. I think it is about, it's got homophobic stuff in it. It's got the rise of the Nazi movement in it. It's got, drug use in it. Essentially, the stories behind it, if you look a little bit deeper, I'm guessing it is like, standing up for yourself and pushing through and all that sort of stuff, like trying to rise above and help the community understand better about, whether you're Christian, like just standing up for yourself, trying to get your voice heard, I guess, is what I sort of took away from it, from a couple of the different stories. The Nazi side of it, where the Jewish hate is in it, I struggled with that, as you've seen. And that's, I think, because I know exactly how that did not end well. That did not just dissipate and go away. It ended up millions of people being murdered. So that I really struggled with, really struggled reading it. And I'm glad that I persevered and read the whole lot, because the section where I talked about it and how it was affecting me and all the rest of it, it didn't continue on in that pattern. So I judged that section that I read, and I probably judged it a little bit harshly. Maybe not, but yeah, and I don't even, none of the stories match. As I said, we're jumping around. We've got, kids that they were taking drugs and all the rest of it, and then you didn't hear anything more about that. You had a guy in a hospital trying to get a private room, then you didn't hear anything about that. Sometimes it would just be going along and it'd just stop. Like someone was going to say something else and it'd just stop. The story didn't finish. So this book is definitely not for me. I'm sorry, I'm rating it a 2-star. I struggled with it, and I'm still struggling with it. I can't even sort of get this into a coherent review, because I was just so confused by the layout. For the most part, as I was reading the stories, the writing's fine. I don't have a problem with the writing as such. I just have a problem with the layout and the construction of the book in general. you know, if he wanted to write a story about a Christian going to art school, write a complete story. Like, it still feels like it's not finished. Like, it's like half the novel's missing. But this is my opinion. You know, other people may have read this book and absolutely loved it, and I'm sure. And I haven't gone and looked at any reviews, so I don't actually know what people have thought about it or anything like that. But for me, it just wasn't the book for me, which is a shame, because I was hoping, you know, like, it's got, although my favourite part of it was when Duncan was opening up his bookstore. Like, even though I said that he was like a bastard to his dad, like, there's obviously some hate there, and it didn't go well, their family unit. I mean, he still got to live out his dream. He got to open up the bookstore, and he made some amazing friends, but I think that story could have even been a little bit more in depth as well. But I did enjoy that story, and it didn't turn out as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like, there for a moment, I thought it was going to get really hectic, and but the author didn't go there. But he still alluded to issues with homophobia, the police, and all that sort of stuff in the 70s and 80s. With the AIDS epidemic and all that sort of stuff. So he sort of touched lightly on those. He didn't go into great detail and all the rest of it. But I must admit, that was probably my favourite part of the book. But it's like a collection of short stories that are unfinished. I think these characters had a lot more to say, and the author just didn't give them like, it just ended. As you can see, this book has really confused me. And I don't often get books that do this to me. I do have another one coming up that I struggled with the writing. That's in the horror genre though. But this one, like, yeah, because I've seen great things, like great reviews about his books in the past and whatnot. So it sort of got me curious. Do I go and get a couple? Because I've never read him before. This is the first time I've read him, but I know of the author. And it's sort of making me wonder, should I go and get some other books of his and give them a read and see if I like them a bit better? This one's just not for me. And this was published in 2014, and it has 613 pages. So 613 pages of stuff that you don't understand can be quite frustrating. But I will say that some places it droned on, and I think I've said that in the little snippets and whatnot, but definitely getting the audiobook and having it playing while I was reading along, one, helped with not making my headache worse, but also helped with the slow parts, because I read my books a little bit faster. So it sort of didn't drone on as much, but when I was reading, it was droning on. I'm like, yeah, let's just get on with the story in a couple of spots where I physically was just reading and not having that audio. But yeah, I'm sorry, but 2 stars. But that is it from me today. I have made progress on other books and whatnot, and I will talk about them as soon as they're finished. Some of them are coming pretty close to a finish, so we've got some more chunksters to talk about. All right, so that's it for me today. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I will see you all again next time. Bye for now.